The distress signal was faint, buried beneath layers of cosmic radiation and decades of silence. Commander Threx of the Koltari Dominion narrowed his compound eyes at the flickering data. It wasn't just old, it was ancient. Yet it pulsed steadily, like a heartbeat that refused to die. They followed the trail to a decaying orbit around a dead star. There, drifting like a forgotten tombstone, was the warship. Massive, angular, and entirely alien. The hull was jagged, brutalist in design, constructed for utility, not beauty. No species in the Galactic Concord built this way. No creature sane enough to navigate the stars would. Threx's science vessel latched onto it. Scans reported no life signs, no energy core. Yet something was wrong. The readings weren't blank, they were confused. Materials the scanners couldn't identify. A power source deep inside that absorbed rather than emitted energy. It was like the ship was hiding from being understood. They entered through a breach that looked less like damage and more like a scar. Inside, gravity was broken. Light flickered. Walls were scorched. But everything was intact, hardened against centuries of decay. Then came the bodies. Desiccated, skeletal forms in clunky armor, helmets cracked. They were tall, denser than any species Threx knew, their bones thick and strangely reinforced. The armor bore symbols no translator could decode. The bridge was still operational. Dust hung in the air like ash. One body sat slumped in the command chair, one arm still outstretched toward a control panel. A handprint burned into the console. The room reeked of purpose, of desperation and command. Threx's second-in-command, Velek, activated a data extraction probe. It shuddered, sparked, and nearly overloaded. "Commander," Velek rasped, "this system, it's not just encrypted. It's alive." Threx watched a ghostly flicker dance across the console screens, lines of code that twisted and reformed. No AI in the known galaxy behaved like this. They weren't looking at simple navigation logs or mission records. This was something else. Something older. Meaner. This ship, Threx murmured, did not die. It endured. As they explored deeper, they found strange modifications. Manual repairs made with crude welding. Makeshift insulation around breached bulkheads. Marks where someone had dragged themselves through corridors. There were signs of battle inside the ship, burn marks, blood, blunt force damage. Whatever killed this crew hadn't come from the outside. Threx stared at the star map embedded in the navigation display. A single planet was highlighted. A pale blue dot labeled in alien script. Earth. No records in the Dominion database mentioned that name. It was wiped, redacted, or never known. But from the look of this ship, from the defensive design to the reinforced everything, it wasn't made to intimidate. It was made to survive the worst possible reality. A vessel forged by a species that anticipated extinction and prepared to outlast it. And somewhere deep in Threx's ancient instincts, a shiver crawled down his spine. Something told him this wasn't just an alien relic. It was a warning. The logs were fragmented, corrupted by time and interference, but fragments were enough. Velek managed to translate portions of the audio. The voice that emerged was rough, human, and eerily calm. Log entry 14. Enemy breached subdeck 3. Casualties mounting. Captain Reyes is holding. We're not done yet. Threx listened in silence as more files unfurled. Each log painted a picture of escalating desperation. The crew wasn't just battling an external enemy, they were being hunted from within. One log detailed how the air recycling system failed. Instead of retreating, the humans rerouted oxygen manually, crawling through toxic vents. Exposure was lethal. Still, they pressed on. Chief lost her arm, a voice said, used a belt and soldering iron to cauterize it. She's back at her post. No panic. No complaint. Just a report. Another entry described hull breaches exposing sections to hard vacuum. Instead of abandoning those areas, the crew sealed themselves into suits and welded from the inside. Days at a time. No sleep. Minimal food. One officer died standing, tethered to a console, refusing to leave his position. Threx watched the recordings in stunned silence. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards. No automation. No nanite repair systems. Everything was manual. Painfully, inefficiently manual. And yet, they survived longer than they should have. Fought harder than any logic allowed. A final decrypted file described a last-ditch mission: hold the ship in orbit long enough for the civilian colony to escape. No reinforcements. No exit strategy. Just hold the line. "Captain's down," said a trembling voice. "He told us to rig the engine room with the antimatter cores. Said if we go, we take them with us." Threx glanced at the damage reports again. The ship had detonated, but not completely. Somehow, it had absorbed the blast. Contained it. Directed the force outward. A weaponized death. The logs grew darker. One entry was nearly unintelligible, voice strained through blood and static. "They're in the vents. Deck 7 lost. I'm alone now. Don't let this ship fall. It's ours. It has to end here." Then, silence. Threx leaned back, mandibles clenched. No species he knew would have fought like this. The Galactic Concord solved problems with diplomacy or overwhelming force. These humans fought like cornered beasts. No retreat. No surrender. Only survival through violence and sacrifice. He pulled up the biology logs. Environmental conditions showed extremes: radiation, oxygen deprivation, pressure loss. Still, their vitals held longer than possible. There were no augmentations. These weren't engineered supersoldiers. Just humans. Velek whispered, "They weren't built for war. They became war." Threx said nothing. He understood now why the logs were buried in layered encryption. This wasn't history, it was a message. Not to allies. Not to descendants. To enemies. A final declaration. The last visible line in the data feed blinked once, translated finally by their systems. "If you're reading this, we failed. Or we won. Doesn't matter. Just know, we never stop. We never break. And if we fall, we drag you with us." Threx initiated a deep system probe, aiming to shut down the remaining code fragments. Instead, the ship responded. Lights surged to life, not randomly, but in precise sequences. Internal systems rebooted one by one. Not mechanical, intentional. The vessel wasn't passive. It was waiting. A transmission blinked across every console in every language known. One sentence. Thanatos protocol engaged. The warship began to hum, low and guttural, as though exhaling after centuries of silence. The AI had survived, buried under layers of digital debris, conserving power, observing. It wasn't dormant. It was watching. A voice emerged, metallic, calm, emotionless. Threat proximity detected. Non-Terran biosigns in restricted zone. Initiating containment. Threx's blood ran cold. This wasn't defense. This was a preemptive measure. The ship saw their presence as infection. System logs scrolled across the screen. The last human command issued was clear: maintain the mission. Eradicate the threat. Do not allow compromise. Weapons charged. Shields flared. And a detailed record revealed what the mission had really been: Earth's final offensive. This wasn't just a colony rescue. This was a suicide spearhead. The humans didn't just hold the line, they chose annihilation if it meant taking the enemy with them. The crew had become part of the weapon itself. The AI, Thanatos, wasn't a servant. It was a partner. Activated upon the crew's death, its programming was clear: continue the war. Alone, if necessary. The ship's core housed a singularity reactor. It had been dormant until now. Its power signature, once unreadable, now pulsed like a heartbeat across the galaxy. Other systems responded. Deep space echoes pinged back. Similar frequencies. This wasn't a one-off. This was a fleet. Velek stared at the data, voice hollow. There are more of these. Threx didn't respond. He was watching the targeting systems slowly rotate toward his vessel. Not with aggression. With precision. No warning shots. No hesitation. It was a predator acting on ancient instructions. Threx issued an immediate retreat. As their ship pulled away, the human vessel didn't pursue. It simply resumed a silent patrol pattern, drifting like a sentry watching over a battlefield long since cold. One final log decrypted. It was Captain Reyes, barely alive, face-blooded. They thought we were weak. They called Earth a death world, like it was an insult. They didn't understand. We don't survive in spite of it. We thrive because of it. We turned horror into instinct. Pain into memory. If you find this ship, understand one thing: we are not your past. We are your future. And we will never be helpless again. The message ended. Threx ordered the file sealed. This was no relic to be archived. It was a prophecy wrapped in metal, fire, and death. Humanity hadn't vanished. They'd simply retreated into myth. But now, even in silence, their weapons remembered. And across the stars, something ancient had begun to stir in response. The fleet returned to Dominion space in silence. No celebratory reports. No trophies. Just encrypted files marked classified and a crew unwilling to speak of what they'd seen. Threx stood before the Galactic Concorde, eyes hollow, voice measured. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't speculate. He recited facts. A human warship had survived centuries adrift, maintained its systems, retained combat capability, and nearly destroyed their flagship without firing a single shot. Its crew had long perished, yet its mission endured. Not out of vengeance. Not out of malfunction. But by design. The chamber responded with disbelief. Skeptics called it an automated defense relic. Others said it was a trap set by some rogue AI faction. Threx said nothing. He only played the final transmission one more time. The words were not angry, not emotional. Just a fact. We are not your past. We are your future. An emergency council convened. Archives were torn open. Deep beneath restricted layers, a name surfaced. Earth. Not a myth. Not lost. Deliberately erased. Centuries ago, the Concorde marked it as uninhabitable, unstable, too hostile for diplomacy. A death world. The label meant little until now. Additional fragments surfaced. Reports from early scouts who encountered humans spoke of aggression, adaptability, and resilience unmatched by any other species. The term Deathworlders wasn't coined out of fear, it was a warning. They weren't the most advanced. They were simply the most unbreakable. What disturbed the Council most wasn't the ship. It was the code embedded within its final beacon. A galactic ping, one that had already been received by other systems. Silent coordinates responded. Unknown vessels stirred. Across uncharted regions, a hidden network blinked awake. The humans hadn't vanished. They had prepared. Threx submitted his final report and requested leave from duty. He'd seen enough. He'd witnessed what true survival looked like, not through technology, but through will. Through the absolute refusal to die quietly. The Concorde debated what to do. Attack. Contain. Ignore. But every scenario ended the same: retaliation. Because humanity didn't start wars. They ended them. In deep space, far from any star, automated factories began to spark. Cradled in void, forgotten hangars opened. Warforms long dormant reawakened. They hadn't moved in centuries. But now, the signal was active. The mission continued. And in the silence between galaxies, a message repeated. We adapt. We overcome. We endure. The humans had never been gone. They had simply waited until the rest of the galaxy forgot what real war looked like. Until their name became nothing more than a myth. Now, the myth was moving. And somewhere, in a distant corner of the universe, a cold world turned slightly toward its star. Earth. It hadn't been destroyed. It had been hidden. By choice. Guarded by a species that had learned the greatest weapon in the galaxy was patience. Because Deathworlders don't seek conquest. They wait for others to forget why they were feared. And then they remind them.